It's Saturday, and welcome to another episode of PO Cubed, your chronological guide to Nintendo's handheld consoles. My name's DD Ash, and this week we're playing Ninja Taro, Loopz, R-Type, Fastest Lap, and Family Jockey. Let's start the show.
Super Mario がアイスになって新発売。今人気のゲームカセットかジョイボールが当たるスーパーマリオアイスでスーパーチャンス。詳しくは袋を見てね。
Ninja Taro DMG-UP, developed by NMK and published by UPL in Japan and American Sammy in North America. Curiously, we have not one, but two throwbacks to earlier Game Boy titles with Ninja Taro. If you remember Maru's mission from a little while ago, you may recall that I said that it was the only Ninja Jajamaru-kun game released in the West, and it is, but Ninja Taro is related, if only loosely. The more intriguing link is a more historical one. The game is set in feudal Japan, at the time when Lord Takeda Shingen was pronounced dead. The country's biggest enemy, one Oda Nobunaga, started to become ambitious, and started talking about unifying all of Japan under his leadership. As the most valiant ninja, help Lord Nobu in his quest to rid the last vestiges of evil and unite the entire country. Unlike Nobunaga's ambition, this is not a strategy game, but actually an action RPG. It's quite a simplistic one, as there's no real leveling up system, nor is there much puzzle solving or currency in the game. Character improvements are made by finding things like sword, shuriken, and health upgrades in the overworld. A lot of the action takes place in the overworld, with very little story progression taking place in towns or villages. Most NPCs are not so helpful. Conversation is not their strong point, but you do need to speak to them, as there's usually one in any new place that acts as a trigger point, giving you some quest or pointer where to go next. There are a couple when you get to the main hub where the king lives that'll give you certain consumables to progress. These are few but necessary, and act as the directors of the game in that some aren't immediately available but need to be unlocked, so to speak. This is something that Zelda games do with great aplomb, of course. For instance, you need the hook shot or flippers or whatever to be able to do X and Y. In Ninja Taro, there aren't nearly as many, nor are their applications as wide-ranging, but they're there nonetheless. Something called water spiders allow you to cross narrow sections of river, and ladders help you scale and descend cliff faces. You can hold up to 15 of these at any time, and it's good to learn which enemies allow you to farm them and stock up before embarking on any large quests. It really sucks to get 90% of the way into a dungeon only to run out of water spiders and not be able to reach the final boss. Other collectibles are found in chests all over the place. Some raise the power of your N sword, some your Murasame, a slightly different sword, some improve your throwing stars, that sort of thing. Other pickups include herbs and potions that heal you, bombs that can be used offensively, and spells that cloak you in fire or make you blend into the scenery. There are also key items that you need to find. Often these are held by a boss and include things like scrolls, important plot points, keys, and a sorrow crystal that is used to destroy an ogre later on. Your soundtrack is very good, musically at least. There aren't too many sound effects, but the songs are well composed with a nice variety. The graphics err on the side of utility a lot of the time. They're decent enough, although your character looks like a chubby monk, even though he's supposed to be a ninja. The enemy variation is pretty good, and they all have their own movement patterns and strengths. There are some great cutscenes though, which provide a delightful respite from both the unrelenting action and the monotonous overworlds. Expect to see quite a bit of tile repetition. That's not such a big deal on an 8-bit system, of course, and the game is pretty huge. It's a long slog actually, one that I'm yet to finish off. It's easy to forget that this game was at least loosely based in actual human history. The story is great though, and the telling of it captivating. That's as important as anything in a grand adventure. Loopz DMG-LP, developed by Argonaut Games and published by Mindscape. What at first appears to be a game in a similar vein to Pipe Mania or Bloddia is actually something a little different. Loopz was designed for the Atari ST originally, and amongst a plethora of home computer versions, including the ZX Spectrum, DOS and Amiga, there was also an NES port as well as this one. You have an 18x7 grid in which random pieces of pipes need to be placed in order to create full circuits. There's a time limit to place each piece on the grid, which at first is easy enough, but once the grid starts getting more cluttered, it becomes tougher. You have 3 lives, which are lost if you fail to place a piece within the time limit. Loops don't have to be circular by any means, you can make them any size and shape as long as a complete circuit is made. Complete the circuit and those pieces are removed, with the larger loops giving more points. There's a similar risk-reward concept to that which you'd find in Tetris, whereby trying to hold on to get that perfect piece to complete what you're trying to do can garner the biggest scores. Some pieces are just one tile, with straight pieces or corners, and can be rotated to any of the 4 directions you need. There are larger pieces as well, such as straight sections that are 3 blocks long, a larger corner, a U-bend, and an often awkward chicane piece. You can also get bombs which can destroy an entire half-made loop. Note that you can block other loops if you need to, but the track cannot intersect with the outermost edge. You can place pieces right at the edge, as long as the track is not touching it. There aren't a lot of rules to follow really, but the game takes a little practice to get good at. My biggest hampering factor when starting out was my ambition, trying to create massive, elaborate loops which got unmanageable pretty quickly. You're better off sticking to smaller ones at first, else you can be stuck waiting for a certain shape and getting all these silly ones that you just can't put anywhere without messing up. If you take up a large part of the playfield with one loop, you're banking a lot on being able to get rid of it. Those lives will drop pretty quickly. There are 3 game modes. Game A follows the basic Loops rule set that I explained above. You can choose a level, the amount of time per move you're allowed, and the game goes on until you run out of lives. Game B follows the same rules, except you're given a bonus score to meet. The game goes on until you hit that score, then it increases. If you can hit the bonus score with one loop, then you go to a bonus stage. The bonus stage is one level of Game C. Game C is totally different. You're presented with a pre-made shape, which is disassembled in front of you piece by piece, and you have to memorize and rebuild it. I'm not as keen on this mode, as it's a memory game rather than a skill one. The music is well composed, quite sinister sounding rather than a jolly jaunt that usually accompanies games like this, and there are 3 tracks to choose from. The game is unhindered by its presentation. You can see everything just fine, but it's unspectacular. Loops is good for a while despite its learning curve, but whether or not the one-dimensional gameplay stands up to its peers such as Tetris is for history to decide. I'm not so sure it has a great deal of lasting appeal.
R-Type. It's mechanical. It's biological. It's your only defense. It's behind you.
R-Type, the sensational arcade game on your home computer now from W.H. Smith, Boots largest stores and leading computer game stockists. From $9.99 to $24.99.
R-Type DMG-RE, developed by Bits Studios and published by IREM. Blast off and strike the evil Bido Empire. One of the quintessential shoot-em-ups, R-Type is one of those that found its way from the arcades onto pretty much everything. There aren't many libraries that this doesn't appear in, and the Game Boy got numbers 1 and 2. There are only 6 stages on the Game Boy version rather than the 8 found in most versions. You fire your guns with B. Unlike most shoot-em-ups out there, you don't have an auto-fire option. It's necessary to constantly tap the button to fire, so I hope you know how to hold the Game Boy steady. Rather, holding B charges up your weapon. The longer you hold it, the stronger it'll be, up to the point where the gauge along the bottom fills up, firing this very powerful laser shot that drives through everything in a line without dissipating. Try to keep this powered up to the maximum at every opportunity, because often a ton of enemies in a swarm fly at you in such a way that would be easy with the beam, but painful without it. Another of R-Type's distinguishing features is something called the Force. It's a small device that you get pretty early on in the game. This is a rotating, indestructible add-on to your ship that attaches to either the front or the back. You can, if you're careful, use it as a shield, taking out projectiles and enemies in your way. Pressing A ejects this force either in front of or behind you. It fires bullets simultaneously to you, and you're able to switch which side of your ship it's on this way. You can collect these orbs that also attach themselves to your ship, acting as shields. Believe me when I say you need these. They sort of trail behind your movements a little bit, but with some practice it's simple enough to keep them positioned where they're most useful. The Force is not just an additional game mechanic, but it's pretty much the most useful part of your progress. Your ship's weapons never really improve, as when you eject the Force outwards, it'll fire any upgrades you have, but your own bullets go back to the basic weapon. In other words, you need to use this thing. There are fortunately plenty of collectibles that will strengthen what you've got going on there. Amongst others, there are missile upgrades, these diagonal laser show things that decimate almost everything, and all of these power-ups are handily numbered so you know what's what. Possibly the best thing about this Force, though, is the ability to fire it outwards and direct it into a weak spot of these massive bosses. It'll do a lot of damage per tick by just being lodged in there, plus of course you're firing bullets as well. The bosses have a lot of HP, so this is a very useful tactic. What we have here is an absolutely stunning looking game. There are fewer better in the whole library, with a gorgeous level of detail and tons of sprites on screen, with a really respectable lack of flickering. I wish the great Chris Hurlsbeck theme music that was used in the Commodore 64 and Amiga versions was there. The music in-game is excellent still, as are the sound effects. The thing that gets me most in R-Type, and this applies to pretty much every version I've played, is my own piloting skills. Sure, there are a lot of enemies, and they all have seemingly massive arsenals, but there are plenty of shields that don't dissipate, that mean you don't need to dodge everything. Sadly, these shields don't stop you ploughing your vessel into a rock face or the walls of a narrow corridor. I do this all the time. It's a hell of a tough game, notoriously so, but I managed to progress at a reasonable clip. The first part of the game I came to that really beat me up was level 4, and beat the crap out of me it did. There are fewer enemies here, but a damn tough labyrinth to navigate, whereby these large meteorite-looking things, I'm not sure what they're supposed to be, move along set patterns around this maze that you're auto-scrolling through. There's such little room for maneuver, and your shield doesn't help at all. You will die here more times than any other part in the game. It's totally brutal, and is the only thing that stops R-Type getting a perfect score for gameplay. I don't mind difficult, but when it's not your skill, but memorization that gets you through, I'm not a fan. You need to follow the exact correct path here, which you won't know until after you've been destroyed, to survive. Several times I had to put the game down because my poor, battered brain couldn't take the failure anymore. I persisted though. I'm not ashamed to say I methodically wrote the path down, and getting through that section has become such a proud memory that I'm actually kind of fearful to attempt it again. R-Type is hard work, and I love it to bits, but damn me do I need some time off from it. Fastest Lap DMG-F2, developed by Kid and published by VAP in Japan and NT Vic in North America. Whether Kid and Konami were racing to see who could get their point-to-point F1 game across the line first, I'm not sure, But with less than a month separating the releases of World Circuit Series and Fastest Lap, you can see where one might draw certain comparisons. Where that one was a polished turd of a game, this one is a despairingly similar affair without the sheen that graces even the poorest Konami titles. It's another one of those racing games where you're always driving upwards. I don't like that style, and games like Micro Machines showed that you can have a top-down aspect and still maintain the feeling of a circuitous track. Also, something that glorious title, and possibly my favourite Game Boy racing game, but that's for later, managed is a feeling of speed. A racing game with no engine noise is missing the biggest open goal I can think of. Why omit it in favour of some cliched music? I've never understood that mentality. That's not the only failure in terms of momentum that this game makes though. You're so zoomed in to the car that if you're driving in the middle of the track, i.e. 90% of the time, you can't see any scenery on either side. And of course there's no detail on the tarmac, so it appears that you're completely stationary until a corner comes. Of course, all the cars, including yours, quickly attain their top speed and hold it, meaning there's not even jostling for position. It's like you're all stuck in situ for the entire straight. The corners, when they do come, approach so rapidly as well that unless you're paying total attention, there's a good chance you're going off the track. There's no satellite or map to help you, nor any signals other than the arrows painted just before the corner. Qualifying first is pretty easy. It's usual to beat the quickest CPU by a good second or more. But as soon as the race starts, they fly off at top speed immediately, whereas you of course have to accelerate up to it. There's no way to avoid dropping from first to fifth before the race is a moment old. Once the front 2 or 3 cars shoot off, you're never seeing them again. Race a flawless race, it doesn't matter. They'll keep the podium warm for you. I can't really fathom if this game is broken or I'm just an idiot, but I cannot get the nitro boost to activate, no matter what I try. There are 3 control systems available, 2 of which purport the nitrous to be fired up using the up direction, and the third using select. I've tried all combinations of buttons, at full speed, at half speed, while braking, while turning, while going straight, and nothing I do makes the car go any faster. It's clearly on the control menu, and the tuning screen blatantly says in black and green, Nitro. I've tried the US version and the Japanese version. I've tried it on my SP, my DMG, an emulator. Nothing works. I even tried taking a pit stop to see if that gives you one. Nope, just slows you down. That's another thing. Why was the pit lane even programmed in? You never need it. The opponents never take a pit stop, and your car's performance never deteriorates, so why put it in there? That's a surefire way of coming last. In the realm of what's the point in this isms, why are all the different tunings put in? Supposedly, choosing a certain engine to steering ratio affects your car's handling and top speed, but honestly, the one that gives you the fastest top speed handles exactly the same as all the other ones. Why would you choose a lower top speed, when even with the max one you never have to brake at any point? This is a hideous car crash of a game, really. It barely even qualifies as a game because even on the easiest setting, it's unwinnable. That's not to say the challenge is too high, it's that the game isn't programmed in such a way that makes it beatable. There are 2 explanations as to what's going on here, and I'm not sure which I favour. Firstly, the game is merely a collection of placeholders that was rushed out without any real programming being completed. Secondly, I'm a dumbass who doesn't understand the game. I've played thousands of games in my time without hyperbole, and I've given this one a good couple of hours. All I can say is, I don't think I'm being an idiot, but the more I play Fastest Lap, the less I'm sure of my own comprehension. No way can a game be this broken. I have to be missing something, right? Family Jockey DMG-FJJ, developed by Use Corporation and published by Namco. A horse racing management game might sound like a daft concept, but remember how popular a sport it is in Japan. It's no different than the F1 management sims we get over here. Originally released on the Famicom in 1987, this was also ported to the TurboGrafx-16, where I can only imagine the enhanced processing power was put to excellent use. The aim is to pick a horse from the many on offer and help to direct it to finish a track as quickly as possible. There are two parts to this. Firstly, you need to choose the correct horse for the track, and secondly, you have to actually help it get round. Progress is achieved by placing in the top 4 out of 6 on each race. Come in the top 3 and you earn prize money. You can spur your horse on by mashing A, but remember that the horse has a limited energy bar. Expend it all and it'll basically pull up. You can jump with B, which can help navigate over hedges and stuff. It behooves you, to take the inside line for obvious reasons, but bear in mind that some corners can have mud or sand traps there which massively slow you down. The management side of the game comes with the horse selection. You'll see various attributes to help you choose. Speed is obvious, as is stamina. Gutsy determines how well your horse will fare when caught in mud or sand, or when it gets jostled by other horses. Jump is how likely your horse will not fall over when you try to clear an obstacle. Turbo determines how well it responds to your whip. Type is the important stat to look out for, as all others can be trained up during the game, but this one is more of a mentality thing, which is constant. A high type value means your horse will perform better under bad weather or track conditions. I tried to choose one with a high type. Sure, this means that the other stats will be lower initially, but in the long run it plays to your favour. You train the attributes by collecting various tiles that show up on the racetrack. The 5 trainable attributes all have their own tokens, and there are also those that increase or decrease your energy bar. In race, the biggest hump to get over at first is placing your horse where it's not going to get jostled by others too much. If you bump into another horse from behind, you'll slow down. If the reverse happens, however, you'll get boosted forward a little, so it's worth trying to get ahead early. Family Jockey is an interesting take on both the racing and simulation genres, and although it probably had much more appeal in Japan than anywhere else, the game surely has its merit. Hey, at least it's not a gambling simulator. It's ahead of the field in that regard, if nothing else. Thanks for listening to the Portable Power Podcast. If you want to support the show, the best way to do so is on Patreon at patreon.com/Portable Power Podcast. Or subscribe on the YouTubes. We have daily uploads Monday to Friday, where you can watch me suck at the games as I talk about them. You can tweet me at POCubed or on any of the other socials you might expect. Thanks again and have a great weekend.